The teller stopped typing. She looked at her screen, then at me, then back at the screen, and something went out of her face that I had known for 15 years, the easy warmth of a woman who used to ask after my wife by name. She leaned across the counter until her voice was barely more than breath. "Sir," she said, "you should sit down." I had come in for $400. $400 for the heart medicine and the deposit on the physical therapy, on an ordinary Tuesday morning in March, with my scarf still crooked around my neck, because there was nobody left at home to straighten it. The account she was looking at was supposed to hold more than $200,000. It held my pension. It held the money from the sale of the farmhouse, where I had raised 2 girls. It held every dollar standing between me and a shared room in a state facility 90 minutes from the only town I have ever loved. And the only other person on earth with the right to touch it was one of my own daughters. Before I take you back to that counter, and to what came after, which is the part I still have trouble saying out loud, do me the kindness of hitting like and subscribing to my channel. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every one of them. An old man doesn't have many ways left to be in a room with people now. Let me take you back to that Tuesday. My name is Walter Pearson, and I was 79 years old that morning, and I believed I already knew the worst thing a man can be asked to carry. I had buried my wife. I had convinced myself that grief was the floor, and that once you're on the floor, there's nowhere further to fall. That morning began the way all of them had since Eleanor passed. I was awake before the light in a house that had learned to be too quiet, drinking coffee I made too strong, because there was no longer anyone to complain about it. At 7 o'clock, my daughter Grace let herself in through the back door, the way she had every single day for 6 years. She set a bag of groceries on the counter and started sorting my pills into the plastic organizer with the days of the week printed across the top, and she didn't ask permission to do it, because after 6 years you don't ask. "Morning, Dad. You take the blue one yet? Waiting on you to nag me." She smiled. 52 years old, and she still had her mother's smile, the one that starts at one corner and takes its time getting to the other. Ever since the stroke put a scare into all of us, Grace had been my hands and my feet. She drove me to the cardiologist. She cleaned the gutters herself rather than pay a man to do it. She cut my toenails when I could no longer reach them, and she never once, not in 6 years, made me feel small about it. She lived 20 minutes out, worked part-time at a bakery, and somehow was always here. My other daughter, Vanessa, lived 2 hours off in the city. She was the one with the title, the corner office, the husband who golfed. She called on holidays. "Pharmacy's got the new prescription ready," Grace said, snapping the organizer shut. "And the therapy place wants their deposit in cash. 400 all told. Card's been acting funny," I said. "Declined at the hardware store twice this week. Probably the chip. I'll run to the bank for you. Save you the trip." "No, it came out sharper than I meant it. A man likes to handle his own money. I'll go. I need the air." She studied me for a second. She always could read me better than her mother could. And her mother could read me like a headline, and then she let it go. "Okay, Dad, don't forget your scarf." I took my checkbook off the counter and shrugged into my coat, and I had no idea. That's the part I'd want you to understand if you understand nothing else about that morning. I had no idea. I was a man annoyed about a chip in a debit card. The bank in Cedar Falls is quiet on a Tuesday morning. There was me, a young mother rocking a stroller with one foot, and Donna Whitfield behind the counter. I'd banked with Donna for 15 years. She had brought a casserole to the house the week Eleanor died and hadn't stayed to be thanked for it. "Morning, Walter. What can I do for you?" "Need 400 out." I slid the checkbook across, the main one. She started typing. Then she stopped. She typed again, slower, the way you do when you're giving a machine a second chance to be wrong. And her smile went somewhere I couldn't follow it. "Walter," she said quietly, "just give me 1 second. Card's been declining. That the same trouble?" She didn't answer right away. She leaned into her screen, and then her eyes came up to mine, and her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Sir, you should sit down," I laughed. It seemed like such a foolish thing to say to a man standing upright at a bank counter with his checkbook in his hand. "Donna, it's me. What's the matter?" "The balance," she said. "There's $12 in the account." The words would not line up in my head. They came at me sideways, like a sentence in a language I'd studied badly 40 years ago. "That's not possible. There should be over 200,000. Walter, please, sit down." She came around the counter and pulled a chair over, and I didn't take it. I gripped the counter instead, because a man who sits down when he's told to is a man who has already agreed with the bad news. "There's a mistake," I said. My own voice arrived from somewhere across the room. "Donna, please, just tell me there's a mistake." She didn't tell me there was a mistake. She went to the printer and came back with 3 pages, still warm, and laid them on the counter in front of me the way you'd lay a sheet over something. Rows and rows of transfers, large ones, thousands at a time, over 3 months, and beside every single one, the same name, over and over, marching down the page like footprints in fresh snow leading away from a house. Vanessa Pearson Cole, my daughter. Donna watched my face. Then, very softly, she asked me the question I would go on hearing in my sleep for weeks afterward. "Walter, do you recognize these withdrawals?" Did I recognize them? Vanessa is my eldest, 56 that year, and sharp as a tack, sharp in the way that can open your hand if you grab it wrong. She left Cedar Falls young and never once looked back over her shoulder to see what she'd left. Marketing executive. Big house in the city. A husband named Bradley who shakes your hand a half-second too long and a half-pound too hard. She was the kind of daughter you brag about at the diner and barely see. At family gatherings, Vanessa swept in late and left early. She'd take a photograph with me, post it somewhere with a caption about cherishing her father while she still had him, and then check her watch. Everyone ate it up with a spoon. "Vanessa's done so well," my sister-in-law Marlene would say. And then lower, leaning in like she was doing me a favor. "Shame about Grace never finding her footing." That was how this family saw my 2 girls. Vanessa the success, Grace the one who stayed home and never amounted to much. That talk always burned me, because it was Grace who showed up. It was Grace who sat beside her mother's bed and held Eleanor's hand at the end, hour after hour, while Vanessa couldn't get away from work. 2 years back, after the stroke, Vanessa sat me down at my own kitchen table and explained, patiently, the way you'd explain to a man who'd wandered in off the road, that it made sense for her name to go on my account. "Just so I can handle things if you can't, Dad. The banking, the bills, the legal end of it. You don't want to burden Grace with all that. She's got enough on her plate, and God help me, I was grateful. Grateful. Vanessa was the capable one. The one with the head for money. You let Grace fuss over your health," she'd said, patting my hand. "Leave the finances to me. It gets complicated." Standing at that counter with those 3 warm pages under my fingers, one thing came rising up out of me like a body coming up out of a lake. A few weeks earlier, Arthur Kellerman, my wife's old friend, the family lawyer, a man I'd known since we were both young enough to be foolish, had left me a message I never returned. "Walter, give me a call. It's about your account." I'd thought it was nothing. I was beginning to understand that I had been, for some time, a fool. I drove home with the printouts riding on the passenger seat where Eleanor used to ride. At every stoplight I glanced over at them, as though the numbers might rearrange themselves into something kinder while I wasn't looking. They didn't. Numbers are the one thing in this world with no interest at all in your feelings. At my kitchen table, I did arithmetic I never expected to have to do at 79. That account was not extra. It was not a cushion or a legacy or a rainy day matter. It was everything. It was the cardiologist. It was medications that cost more than my first car did. It was the physical therapy. And the little margin that let me keep this house. The house I had shared with my wife for 40 years. Where the paint on the kitchen wall is a color she picked out of a fan of 100 nearly identical colors, while I'd stood there pretending I could tell the difference. Without it, I knew exactly where I would end up. The nearest state facility with an open bed was 90 minutes away, in a town I'd only ever driven through on the way to somewhere better. Shared rooms, a waiting list. The kind of place where they call you buddy, because they haven't got time to learn your name, and won't have you long enough for it to matter. I thought about Eleanor. I thought about what she would say if she could see what one of our girls had done to the other one's inheritance, and her father's last years. My hand shook when I called Vanessa, straight to voicemail. I called again, voicemail. I texted her, slow, one finger at a time, the way I do. Call me. It's about my account. It's urgent. Nothing. An hour later, my phone buzzed on the table, and it wasn't Vanessa. It was Marlene, my sister-in-law. Walter, sweetheart, heard you've been having some money trouble. Vanessa's just beside herself, worrying about you and Grace. Let us know if there's anything we can do. XO, I read it 3 times, money trouble. Vanessa's worrying about me and Grace. I turned the phone face down on the table and sat looking at that wall my wife had picked the paint for. And I understood that the question had changed while I wasn't paying attention. The question was no longer only where my money had gone. The question was what exactly. My daughter had already told the rest of this family. And why she had gone out of her way to put her sister's name in the same sentence as the word trouble. That evening, after Grace had gone home, I went through Eleanor's old desk. She kept everything in that desk, every receipt. Every birthday card either of the girls ever gave her, including the ones made of construction paper and optimism. Warranties for machines we'd hauled to the dump a decade ago. My wife did not believe in throwing away evidence that a life had happened. I sat in the lamplight and pulled open the bottom drawer. Tax forms, insurance, a photograph of the 2 of us on the farmhouse porch, young and grinning and so certain that we'd earned it. And then near the bottom, an envelope that didn't look old at all, crisp, white, a clean serif return address. Kellerman and Associates, attorneys at law. The postmark was 3 months back. It was addressed to me. It had never been opened. Vanessa handled my mail when she visited. She'd made a point of it, sorting the stack at the counter, tossing what she called the junk, telling me it was one less thing. And somehow this one had ended up filed away in a drawer instead of in my hands. My heart was going for no reason I could have named out loud. Why would Arthur be writing to me? And how does a letter get itself buried under the tax forms of a woman who has been dead for 2 years? The phone rang. It was Grace. Dad, you sound funny. You all right? I almost told her. It was right there in my throat. But something held my tongue, and I have thought a long time about what that something was, and I think it was this. If Vanessa had truly done what those pages said, and if she had already been out in this town, telling people that Grace was the problem, then anything I said before I understood, it would be a stone thrown into a pond I couldn't see the bottom of. I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired. Found some of your mother's old letters, got sentimental. Want me to come back over? No, get some rest, you do enough. I hung up and sat there a long while with that unopened envelope in my swollen hands, my thumb resting on the seal. I didn't open it that night. I still can't fully explain why. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll open it tomorrow. By morning it was still on the desk, still sealed. I'd like to tell you that was patience. The truth is that part of me was afraid of learning what kind of weather had been building over my own roof while I sat under it, grateful. I made a decision over my coffee, and it was the first decision in that whole business that was entirely mine. I was not going to storm anywhere. I was not going to get on the telephone and holler about thieves to every relative I had. Because if I did, Vanessa would simply spin it. She would make me out to be a confused old man who could no longer track his own money, and she had already planted that seed and watered it. The worried daughter, the failing father. It's a story people are so ready to believe that you barely have to tell it. You just have to leave it lying around where they'll find it. No, I was going to understand it first. Every dollar, every date, every signature. I spread the printouts on the table and read them properly, slow, with my reading glasses down where they belonged. And I didn't understand half of what I was reading. Authorized transfer, account holder of record, words from a country I'd let Vanessa hold the passport for. But I knew two people who spoke that language, Donna at the bank and Arthur Kellerman. And there was one more thing, and it shames me even now to set it down. Vanessa had spent weeks making this look like Grace, but Grace wasn't even on that account. Grace had never asked me for a dime in her life. Grace was the one who had told me, "More than once, Dad, you ought to keep an eye on the money side." Just to be safe, and I had waved her off. Vanessa's got it handled, I'd said. I don't want a war with my own daughter, I said out loud, to my empty kitchen, to the paint Eleanor picked. I just want the truth. I meant it too. I thought the worst part was over. I thought the worst part was sitting there with cold coffee and a stack of paper that wouldn't add up. I had no way of knowing that the worst part hadn't started yet. Donna met me at the bank on her break. She took me into a little side room with a round table and spread the statements out between us. Grace had driven me there and was waiting in the lobby with a magazine she wasn't reading. I wasn't ready to show her. I want to be honest about that. Some of it was protecting her, and some of it was pride. And at 79 you'd think a man would have learned to tell those two apart. I'm not supposed to give advice, Donna said, but I can tell you what's on the page. Please. She pointed to a line at the top that I had read past a dozen times without ever once reading it. Joint owner Vanessa Pearson Cole. When Vanessa went on this account 2 years ago, Donna said, she didn't go on as a helper. There's no such thing as a helper. She went on as a joint owner, full owner, the same as you. But it's my money, it's my pension. The farmhouse was mine and Eleanor's. Legally, that doesn't matter. Her voice was very careful, the way you'd carry something hot across a kitchen. Once she's a joint owner, the law says that money is as much hers as yours. She can withdraw any amount at any time. She doesn't need your permission. She doesn't have to tell you. The room got smaller, so when she took it. On paper, Donna said, she didn't steal anything. She withdrew from an account she legally co-owned. I sat with that a moment. A man saves for 50 years, and his own child empties it out, and the law just shrugs its shoulders and asks if there'll be anything else today. She didn't steal a thing, I said slowly. On paper. On paper, Donna agreed. And I heard everything she wasn't allowed to say sitting underneath those 3 words like a foundation under a house. I looked at the rows again, the dates, the careful climbing amounts, 2,000, then 5, then 15, then 22. She hadn't grabbed it all at once. She had bled it out slow, the way you would if you were hoping an old man wouldn't notice, the way a person does when they still, somewhere in the back of their mind, intend to put it back. She went on my account to handle the paperwork, I said. That's what she told me. Donna said nothing at all. She just looked at me, and I understood. The paperwork was never the point. The paperwork was the doorway. But paper, I was about to learn, doesn't always tell the whole story. My wife had kept a great deal off the page. I felt the town change before I understood it. It was at the diner on Main Street, where I've taken my breakfast most mornings for 30 years. Gerald Mercer caught my eye from his booth. Gerald, who I've known since we were both 19 and stupid, and then found himself suddenly and completely fascinated by his eggs. The waitress, a girl I've known since she wore her hair in pigtails and could barely see over the counter, set my coffee down without a word. In a town the size of Cedar Falls, you can feel a story moving through it the way you feel a draft come under a door. You don't have to see it. The hair on your arms tells you. It was Marlene who finally said it out loud. She called that afternoon, all sugar and concern. "Walter, I have to ask. Vanessa told us about your account, about the money being gone." My stomach turned over. What did Vanessa tell you? That it's mostly gone, and that, a pause. The particular kind of pause people take when they are enjoying themselves and would rather you didn't notice. That Grace has been taking it. From you. Vanessa says she found out and she's just heartbroken. She said she didn't want to say anything, but the family deserved to know the truth. For a moment I could not get air into my chest. She hadn't just taken my money, she had built a house around it and moved her sister into the room marked thief. Grace, the one who had never taken a penny, the one who showed up every single day for 6 years and cut my toenails and never made me feel small. "Marlene," I said, and I was proud of how level I kept it. "Grace hasn't touched my money. Grace isn't even on the account." "Vanessa is." A silence. And then gently, the way you'd speak to a man you'd already decided was somewhere far away and sinking. "Oh, Walter, of course you'd defend Grace. You always have." That was the moment I understood the shape of the thing. The truth, standing there all by itself, was not going to be enough. I was going to have to prove it. And I was going to have to prove it in front of every soul in this town, because that's where the lie had already been. Vanessa finally called me back that night. 3 days of silence, and then her name on my screen at 9 o'clock. "Dad?" Her voice was warm and smooth. It was the voice she used on clients, and I had heard her use it on me for years, without ever once identifying it. "I hear you've been working yourself up." "Working myself up." I kept my own voice level. "Vanessa, the account is empty." "My account. I know, it's a mess. The bank's been a nightmare about all of it." A long sigh performed for my benefit, the way an actor sighs so the back row can hear it. "Listen, Dad, you don't need to be digging into this. It's complicated, and it's not good for your heart." "I'm not digging. I'm reading the statements." A pause. The warmth cooled several degrees, like a room when a door opened somewhere else in the house. "The statements," she repeated. "Your name is on every transfer, every single one. I'm a joint owner, and now there was steel under the syrup. I have every right to manage that money. You don't understand how any of this works, Dad. You never did. Mom always handled it. Then help me understand. Where did $200,000 go?" She didn't answer that. She didn't even pretend to reach for an answer, and that told me more than any answer would have. Instead, her voice dropped low and went almost kind, which was worse than shouting. Shouting I could have taken. Shouting I could have shouted back at. "You want to be careful here," she said. "You start making accusations. At your age, with your memory, people are going to start wondering if you're still all there. Grace included. You don't want them thinking you can't manage on your own anymore. You know what comes next." There it was. Not a daughter. A threat wearing my daughter's voice like a coat she'd borrowed, and the thing she was threatening me with was the 90-minute drive. "The shared room. The place where they call you buddy." "I'm not making anything up, Vanessa," I said. "I'm reading the statements." "Get some sleep, Dad. We'll talk when you're thinking clearly." The line went dead. I stood in my dark kitchen with the phone still warm in my hand, and I felt something settle in me, cold and level and permanent. I had crossed a line I could not step back over. Whatever came next, there was no version of my life where I unheard what I had just heard. The only way out of it was straight through. Kellerman and Associates turned out to be 2 rooms above the hardware store, with a coffee maker older than my truck. Arthur Kellerman was a thin man near my own age, reading glasses shoved up on his forehead, a handshake gentler than I'd expected from a lawyer. "Walter Pearson," he said, settling in behind his desk. "I've been trying to reach you for months, I know. I'm sorry I didn't get your letter until this week." And I told him why. The drawer, the mail Vanessa handled. The account with $12 in it. He listened without interrupting once, fingers laced together on the blotter. When I finished, he was quiet a moment. "I can't tell you everything your late wife and I discussed," he said. "Privilege survives her. You understand that." "My wife?" That stopped me the way a hand on the chest stops you. "Arthur, what's Eleanor got to do with any of this?" He took the glasses off his forehead and folded them and set them down, and he did it slowly. And I understood that he was buying himself a second to decide how to say a thing. "Before she passed, your wife came to see me more than once. She was worried, Walter, about Vanessa, about how Vanessa handled money, and about her name going on that account." My chest went tight in the particular way my cardiologist has a word for. "Eleanor never said a word to me. She didn't want to turn you against your own daughter on the strength of a feeling," he said gently. "So she did some quiet things instead, to protect you, while she still could. Eleanor, 40 years of marriage. And at the end of it, when she had every excuse in the world to be thinking about herself, she was standing watch over my back." "Protect me how?" He smiled, but he didn't answer. "That part I can't say yet, it isn't mine to tell." "Then whose is it?" "Hers." He stood, which is how a lawyer tells you the hour is up. "Your wife left instructions for the day this came, and it's come. Give me a few days to put it together." I left with more questions than I'd brought, but for the first time in a week I felt something in my chest that wasn't dread. My Eleanor had seen it coming. From the other side of the grave, that woman was still looking after me. Knowing that Eleanor had left a plan and being able to reach it turned out to be 2 entirely different animals. I went back to the bank and asked them to freeze the account. The manager was polite and immovable, which is the worst combination there is. "It's a joint account, Mr. Pearson. Either owner can access it. I can't lock your daughter out without a court order." A court order. The word sat in my mouth like a stone I couldn't work loose. I tried the family next. I called my nephew Nathan, a level-headed man, a man who reads the fine print on things, and asked him if he'd sit down with me and just look at the statements. Just look at them. He hemmed, he hawed. "Uncle Walter, I don't want to get in the middle of this. Vanessa says you've been confused lately, that this whole thing's got you upset, and Grace is making it worse." "Nathan, I've got the papers right here in my hand. Her name is on every line. I'm sure there's an explanation," he said. "There always is," and another door swung closed, quiet and polite, the way the doors close on a man my age. Nobody slams them. They just latch, one after another, and you find yourself standing in a smaller and smaller room. Meanwhile, the bills did not care about any of it. The cardiologist's office called about a balance. The pharmacy needed the new prescription paid for. I covered what I could out of the little that was in checking, and watched my own numbers shrink, and did the grim arithmetic of exactly how long an old man can hold his breath. 2 months, maybe 3. Worst of all, I could see it landing on Grace. People had gone cool to her at the bakery, cool in the small town way, where nobody says anything and everybody says everything. She came by one evening, with her eyes red at the rims, and asked me, quiet, not looking at me, "Dad, did Vanessa tell people I took your money?" I could not lie to her. I have never been able to lie to that girl, and I've never much wanted to. When I told her the truth, she didn't get angry. That's what undid me. She just took my hand in both of hers and said, "Then we clear it up together." That steadied me more than anything in that whole miserable season. I wasn't fighting alone. But I still had no proof, and this family had already made up its mind. The phone call came from Bradley, Vanessa's husband. In 30 years, Bradley had never once called me on his own, not for a birthday, not for a death, not for anything. He was all firm handshakes and golf stories, the kind of man who corrects your grammar at Thanksgiving and thinks he's being generous about it. So when his name lit up my screen, I nearly didn't answer. Walter. His voice was pulled tight as a fence wire. "I need you to stop this. Whatever you're doing, you're putting Vanessa through hell. I'm putting her through hell." I almost laughed. "Bradley, she emptied her own father's account. She's under enormous pressure. You have no idea what this year has been." What kind of pressure? He caught himself, but a beat too late. That's the thing about a man who's been holding something for a long time. The second somebody asks, his hands remember how tired they are. The business, my investments, we've had setbacks, the kind that follow a man home and sit down at his dinner table. "What setbacks, Bradley?" A long silence. When he spoke again, his voice had cracked along an edge somewhere. "We're behind on the house, months behind. The bank sent the real letter." A shaky breath. Vanessa couldn't stand the thought of anyone finding out. "The club, her colleagues. So she said it was temporary, a loan. She said she'd put it all back before you ever noticed a thing." He stopped himself, but it was too late, and we both knew it was too late, and neither of us said so. And the picture came into focus with a click I could almost hear. Vanessa was not a greedy woman helping herself for sport. She was drowning. The big house, the title, the captions about cherishing her father while she still had him, all of it was a woman holding her breath underwater and smiling up through it so the people on the dock wouldn't worry. And my account was the last air in the room. It did not make it right. Nothing on God's earth made it right. She robbed her father and handed the blame to her sister, and there is no arithmetic anywhere that balances that. But it made her human, and somehow that was worse. "Bradley," I said gently, "why are you really calling me?" He didn't answer. He hung up, and I sat there in the dark understanding that my daughter was not a villain in this story. She was a desperate woman, which made her a great deal more dangerous. 2 days later, the invitations went out. Vanessa was throwing me a party, my 80th birthday, at the Maplewood, the nicest place in town, where people book their weddings and their 40th anniversaries. She had invited everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, the old crowd from church, half of Main Street. I found out the way I found out everything now. Secondhand. Marlene mentioned it on the phone, assuming I already knew. Isn't it lovely, Vanessa's sparing no expense for her daddy? Such a devoted girl. A devoted girl, throwing a lavish party with money she could not account for, in front of every person whose opinion carried any weight in this town. I understood exactly what it was, and I understood it immediately. And I want you to know that 79 years old is not too old to see a thing coming. It was a stage. It was a chance for Vanessa to stand up in front of everyone as the generous daughter, the reliable one, the one who came home, and to set the story she'd been selling into concrete while it was still wet. And Grace, if she was mentioned at all, would be the sad sister, the one who couldn't be trusted around her father's money. That night Vanessa called, smooth as ever. "Dad, about the party." A pause, weighed out to the ounce. "I think it'd be best if Grace didn't come. She's been so worked up. I don't want a scene on your big day. It's my birthday, I said. Grace will be at my side. Dad, please. People are already worried about your judgment. Don't make this harder than it has to be. My judgment. She had taken my own age and turned it around in her hand and pointed it at me. After she hung up, I sat a long while at Eleanor's desk with my hand flat on the wood. Then I called Arthur Kellerman and told him about the party. About the maple wood. About all of it. He was quiet for a moment. Walter, he said, I'll have everything ready by then. And if you'll allow it, I'd like to be there myself. At the party? In the room, he said. When the time comes. The next morning, Grace drove me to his office. I had told her everything by then. The account, the joint ownership, Vanessa, the lies. She'd cried once, hard in the cab of the truck, with both hands on the wheel and the engine off. And then she had squared her shoulders and said, Okay, Dad, what do we do? Arthur met us at the door himself and brought us coffee in mismatched mugs. Then he opened a thick leather folder on the desk and laid both hands flat on top of it, almost the way a man rests his hands on a Bible. Your wife was a careful woman, Walter, he said. Smarter than the two of us put together. Don't I know it? About 6 months before she passed, Eleanor came to me. She'd watched Vanessa handle money for years and it worried her. She said, and I'm quoting her because I wrote it down that day and I've never forgotten it, she said, Arthur, I won't be around to watch the hen house. Lock the door for me. I had to look away out the window at the roof of the hardware store. I could hear her saying it. That was Eleanor to the bone. 40 years, and the woman never once raised her voice, and never once lost an argument. So we did some things, Arthur said quietly. They've been sitting in a drawer ever since, in case they were ever needed. He looked at me steadily. They're needed now. What things? He shook his head, gentle about it. On the day, in front of everyone, Eleanor was specific about that. Out in the open, she said, where nobody can whisper it away afterward. He glanced at Grace, and she was very clear that Grace should be standing right beside you when it happens. Grace reached over and took my hand. I'm not going to that party to fight my own daughter, I said, and my voice came out rough as a gravel road. I'm going to clear Grace's name, and to stop being handled like a confused old fool who can't mind his own house. Arthur nodded once. Then bring your daughter, he said, the good one, and he almost smiled, and let your wife do the rest. The maple wood glowed that evening. White tablecloths, soft jazz from a speaker in the corner, a banner in gold letters that read Happy 80th Walter. Vanessa had spared nothing. 30-odd people filled the private room, every aunt, every cousin, faces from church and from Main Street, all of them dressed up and smiling. I came in with Grace on my arm. The conversation didn't stop exactly. It stumbled. I heard it go across that room like wind crossing a wheat field, a soft hiss of whispers behind cupped hands. Heads turned toward my younger daughter. Eyes slid off of her and found the carpet. Vanessa saw us from across the room and crossed the floor fast, her smile bright and her eyes hard as 2 coins. Dad, she kissed my cheek, you look wonderful. And then low, just for me, I asked you to leave Grace at home. She's my daughter, I said quietly. Both of you are. I brought her. Vanessa straightened. I watched her scan the room and recalculate, the way you'd watch a woman check her figures. Then the smile came back, wide and public. Everyone made it, she announced. Wonderful. Family is everything, isn't it? People raised their glasses. The jazz played on. She moved through that crowd like a woman running for office, shaking hands, laughing at the right beats, refilling drinks, the devoted daughter hosting the perfect night for her father. Grace settled me at the head table and sat down close beside me. Marlene gave her a thin, pitying smile from across the room, the kind of smile that's really a verdict. Gerald Mercer wouldn't look at either of us. And in the back corner, almost hidden behind a pillar, a thin old man in a gray suit sat alone with a leather folder on his lap. Arthur caught my eye. He gave me the smallest nod a man can give and still call it a nod. "Steady, Dad," Grace murmured. "Wait for it." Vanessa tapped a fork against her glass and called for everyone's attention and stepped to the front of the room with a champagne flute raised high. The room went quiet, and I felt the whole night tilt toward whatever was coming, the way a boat tilts when everyone moves to one rail. "Thank you all for coming," she began. 80 years, can you believe it? My father has given this family everything." Warm murmurs. Somebody said, "Here, here." "And family," Vanessa went on, her voice swelling into the room like water. "Finding the low ground means responsibility. It means caring for our parents when they can't care for themselves, especially their finances, when their judgment isn't quite what it used to be." She let that hang. Her eyes touched me for just a second, soft and sad, the loving daughter, worried about her failing dad. "It hasn't been easy lately," she said, lowering her voice into something grave. "Some of you know there've been concerns about Dad's accounts. About someone close to him who hasn't acted in his best interest." A pause, heavy, measured out to the half-second. "I've tried to handle it quietly, to protect this family. But I think it's time we were honest about who's been taking advantage of him." The whispers started, and this time nearly every head in that room turned, slow and certain, toward Grace. I felt my girl go rigid beside me. Her hand found mine under the tablecloth and gripped it hard enough to hurt. 30 faces. 30 people who had known my daughters their entire lives, looking at my good child like she was something they'd scraped off a shoe. I stood up. It took me a moment. My knees aren't what they were, and Grace rose halfway to steady me. The room froze. Vanessa's smile flickered just for an instant, the way a bulb flickers before you decide whether you saw it, and then she caught it. "Dad," she said smoothly, "sit down. This isn't the time. You're right about one thing, Vanessa." My voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. "Someone close to me took my money, and I think it's time this whole family knew exactly who. In black and white." I nodded toward the back of the room. Arthur Kellerman stood up and walked forward with the leather folder in his hands, and I watched Vanessa's eyes lock onto it, and I watched the color go out of my daughter's face like water going out of a tub. Arthur set a stack of pages down on the white tablecloth in the center of the room, where every person there could see it. "My name is Arthur Kellerman," he said. "I've been this family's attorney for 40 years. With Walter's permission, I'm going to read from his bank statements. You're welcome to pass them around afterward." "This is absurd," Vanessa said. "Dad's confused." "Nobody needs to." "January 12th, Arthur read, calm as a Sunday morning. "Transfer out, $15,000. Recipient, Vanessa Pearson Cole." The room went very still. "January 26th, $22,000. Vanessa Pearson Cole." He turned a page without hurrying. "February 9th, 18,000. February 23rd, 30,000. Each one the same name." Every name landed like a stone dropped into still water, and I watched the rings move out across their faces. Confusion first, then doubt, then something colder and more honest. Marlene's hand had risen to her mouth. Gerald Mercer was staring at Vanessa now. "Not at Grace, at Vanessa. It's a joint account," Vanessa said, and her voice had climbed. "I'm a co-owner." "This is legal. I had every right. Nobody said it was illegal, Vanessa." I kept my voice quiet and even. "The way Eleanor used to when she meant business. I'm saying it happened. These aren't accusations. These are dates and dollar amounts. Read them yourselves." Arthur slid the folder down the table. A cousin opened it. Another leaned in over his shoulder. And I stood there and watched those pages travel hand to hand down that long white table. And I watched the story my daughter had spent weeks building come apart line by line in silence. in front of everyone she had built it for. You told them it was Grace, I said. You told this whole town your sister was robbing me, while your name sat on every single withdrawal. That's not. Vanessa looked around the room and found not one friendly face in it. You don't understand the situation, Dad. Then explain it, said my nephew Nathan, grim, holding a page up. Explain this, Vanessa. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out of it. And into that silence, Arthur Kellerman said, There's more, quite a bit more. He drew a second set of documents out of the folder. Older ones. The paper gone soft at the corners the way paper does when a careful person has handled it many times. Some of you knew Eleanor Pearson, he said. The room quieted at her name, it always did. 6 months before she passed, she came to my office. She was sharp as a blade that day, and she was worried about this exact situation. So she instructed me to do 2 things, and to keep them sealed until they were needed. Vanessa had gone gray. Mom, what did Mom do? First, Arthur said, on Eleanor's instruction, and with Eleanor sitting in the bank lobby herself to sign it, 45 days before her death, Vanessa's status as joint owner of that account was formally revoked. She was removed. The bank executed the paperwork. The confirmation letter went out by mail. He looked up, to this house, where it was never opened. A gasp somewhere near the back. Which means, Arthur went on, in the flat voice of a man reading a weather report, that every withdrawal you just heard me read, all of them dated this year, long after the revocation was executed, was made by someone with no legal right to that account. That is not a family disagreement. That is unauthorized. The courts can address it, and they will if we ask them to. Vanessa's mouth worked without sound. She was staring at the dates, at the trap she had walked into without ever once seeing the floor. Second, Arthur said, Eleanor placed the proceeds of the farmhouse and a reserve for Walter's care into a protected trust, out of reach of either daughter's signature. He paused, and she named a trustee, the person she chose to guard her husband's care if the day ever came. He turned, and he looked at Grace. She named Grace. 30 heads swung toward my younger girl. Grace froze beside me. She hadn't known. I saw it go across her face, the pure, undefended shock of it. She turned to me and I could only shake my head, because I hadn't known either. Eleanor had kept it from both of us. She kept it from me because she knew that if I'd known, I'd have gone to Vanessa. And Eleanor understood, better than I ever did, that you cannot warn a fox. You can only lock the door. Then Grace looked across that room at her sister, and when she spoke, her voice was soft and perfectly steady. Mom knew Vanessa, she said. She knew all along. For a moment Vanessa just stood there, the champagne flute still in her hand, the gold banner behind her, 30 people watching. Then her composure went all at once, like ice going out on a pond in spring, not cracking exactly. Just no longer holding anything. You don't understand, she said, and her voice had lost every bit of its polish. I was going to put it back, every dollar. I just needed time. The market turned on us, the house. Bradley's debts. We were drowning. You let them think it was your sister. Marlene had lowered her hand and her face had gone hard. You called me. You sat in my kitchen and told me Grace was robbing her own father. I panicked. Vanessa turned to the room, pleading now. And I want to tell you the truth, which is that watching her do it was the worst moment of my life. Worse than the bank. Worse than any of it. You don't know what it's like to lose everything and keep smiling at the club every Saturday. So you took it from him. Nathan nodded at me. From your 80-year-old father, who needs that money to live? Vanessa spun toward me. Dad, you can fix this. Tell them. Tell them you always loved Grace more. Mom set this whole thing up to make me look. Stop. My voice came out louder than it had in 20 years. The room went absolutely still. Your mother set nothing up, I said. She protected me from you, and she was right too. At the back, Bradley had come in late and stood frozen by the door, his face the color of ash. He did not say one word in her defense. He looked at the floor. I could have let my daughter drown right there in front of everyone. Part of me wanted to. God forgive me. Part of me had wanted to since I walked out of that bank with 3 warm pages in my hand. But Eleanor's voice was in my head, and drowning her was not what the man Eleanor married would do. You're still my daughter, Vanessa, I said. I won't send you to prison if there's another road, but you'll pay back every cent, through Arthur, on paper. And you will never again touch my money or your sister's name. The party was over. Everybody in that room knew it. The jazz kept playing its cheerful little tune through the wall. Absurd now, music at the wrong funeral. Vanessa set down her glass. Her hand was trembling. She looked around the room one last time, searching every face for a single ally, and she did not find one. Then she walked out, Bradley a few steps behind her, and the door of the Maplewood swung shut. Nobody spoke. And then I did the thing I had been needing to do for 6 years, and had been too much of a coward to do at any Thanksgiving, any Christmas, any Sunday dinner, where it would have cost me nothing but a moment of discomfort. I gripped the edge of the table, steadied myself on Grace's shoulder, and I stood up as tall as my old back would let me, so the whole room had to look at me. I want to say something about my daughter Grace, I said. The room held its breath. For 6 years, this girl has driven me to every appointment. She's sorted my pills. She's fixed my roof. She sat with me in the evenings so I wouldn't be alone in that house at night. My voice wavered, and then it held. She did all of it while the rest of you called her the one who never amounted to anything. I looked around that room, slow, and I made sure I got to every face. She amounted to everything. You all just weren't looking. Grace was crying. So was I. I won't pretend otherwise. I'm 80 years old and I've stopped apologizing for it. Marlene was crying too. Nathan came over and put a heavy hand on Grace's shoulder. We owe you an apology, Grace, he said gruffly. Every one of us does. And one by one, the faces that had turned away from her at the diner turned back. Not with pity this time. With something closer to shame, and something closer to respect. I sat back down, worn through and lighter than I'd felt in months, and took my daughter's hand. Your mother knew what she had in you, I told her, and now so do they. Arthur moved fast in the days after. He filed an emergency motion, and inside of a week a judge had frozen anything Vanessa could still reach. The protected trust was already locked tight. That was Eleanor's doing, and it held, because everything that woman ever built held. We sat in Arthur's office, Grace and I, while he laid the options out across his old wooden desk like a man dealing cards. You could press criminal charges, Walter, he said. The withdrawals after the revocation were unauthorized. A prosecutor would have a real case here. I want to be sure you know that. I sat with it a long moment. Longer than Grace expected, I think. Then I shook my head. She's still my child. Eleanor would never forgive me if I put our daughter in a cell. I want the money back. I want her out of my accounts. That's all I want. So Arthur built a different road. A structured repayment agreement signed and binding in exchange for not pursuing charges. Vanessa, facing prison, signed every page. It wasn't all there. A good deal of it was simply gone, swallowed by debt and bad investments, and a country club membership that a woman had robbed her own father to keep. But between the trust Eleanor had walled off and the assets Vanessa was forced to liquidate, the numbers came out where they needed to come out. She sold the second car, the jewelry, a vacation condo they'd been underwater on for over a year. In the end, she repaid a little over $120,000 on a schedule Arthur enforces to this day. Combined with what my wife had locked away before she died, it was enough for the medications. Enough for the cardiologist. Enough for the physical therapy and the aide who comes twice a week now. Enough for me to stay exactly where I belong, in my own bed, in the house Eleanor and I built, with the paint she picked out. That 90-minute drive never happened. Some nights I still think about it. The shared room, the waiting list. How close a whole life came to fitting into a duffel bag. Vanessa and Bradley lost the house anyway. The repayment took whatever the bank hadn't already claimed, and in a town the size of Cedar Falls, the story of the Maplewood traveled faster than any billboard could have carried it. Inside a week it was everywhere. The colleagues she'd been so terrified of finding out, they found out. The country club she had emptied her father's account to keep up appearances had quietly let her membership lapse. I won't pretend I didn't grieve that. She's still my daughter. I taught her to ride a bicycle in that farmhouse driveway. I walked her down an aisle in a church I can still smell if I close my eyes. About a month after the party, a letter came. Her handwriting shaky on the envelope. Inside a single page, she didn't ask for anything. That's what I keep coming back to. She just said she was sorry, and that she'd understand if I never wanted to see her again. I read it twice. Then I put it in Eleanor's desk drawer, in with the old receipts and the photograph from the porch. I haven't answered it yet. Some wounds a man has to sit with a while before he knows what to say, but I keep it. In the drawer where my wife kept the evidence that a life had happened. That counts for something. I'm not sure yet what. Then one gray afternoon there was a knock, and Bradley was standing on my porch. No firm handshake, no golf story. Just a tired man holding his hat in both hands like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I left her, Walter," he said before I could get a word out. After it all came out, he swallowed. I should have stopped her a long time ago, and I didn't. I came to say I'm sorry to you, and to Grace. I knew, and I helped her hide it. I looked at him a long moment. Then I stepped back and held the door open. "Coffee's on," I said. "Grace is in the kitchen. You can say it to her yourself." The hardest part, it turned out, wasn't Vanessa at all. It was everyone else. The same relatives who had looked straight through my daughter at the diner now couldn't do enough for her. Marlene started calling every few days. Cousins, who hadn't spoken to either of us in years, sent cards with pre-printed sentiments, and their names signed underneath. Gerald Mercer stopped me outside church, gripped my hand in both of his, and told me how sorry he was. How he should have known better. I'll be honest with you. There was a part of me, the proud, stubborn, 79-year-old part, that had been keeping score longer than it should have, that wanted to be cold to every one of them. They had believed Vanessa over my Grace in a heartbeat. They had tried my good girl and convicted her on the strength of one phone call. But cold doesn't warm an old man's house, and it isn't who Eleanor raised me to be. She raised me, understand, more than my mother did. There's a certain kind of man who does most of his growing up after the wedding. So when Marlene came by with a pie and a long, teary apology, I let her say the whole thing. I made her coffee, and then gently I told her the truth. "I'm glad you see it different now, Marlene." "I am, but I wish you'd asked me first, or asked Grace, before you decided she was a thief." She started to defend herself, and then, to her credit, she stopped. "You're right, Walter. I'm ashamed. I know you are. And I meant it. We're all right, but this family is done treating Grace like the one to blame. She earned better from every one of us. That was the line I drew with all of them. Not anger. Not a punishment. Just a fence, set politely and firmly in the ground, where a fence should have been standing for 20 years. Some understood it. Nathan became a real friend, comes by Saturdays now to sit with me and watch the ball game and complain about the bullpen. Others drifted off, uncomfortable around an old man who had stopped needing their good opinion. I find I can live with that just fine. And Grace holds her head a little higher in this town now. It was a long time coming, and it should never have needed a bank statement to arrive. One evening, weeks later, the two of us sat out on the back porch in that soft hour when the light goes gold and everything looks forgiven whether it is or not. She had a quilt over my knees and I had a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. "Dad," she said, "can I ask you something? Anything. Did you ever suspect Vanessa? Before the bank, I mean. Did Mom ever say anything to you?" I was quiet a while, watching the yard go dim. "No," I admitted. "Your mother carried it alone. I've wondered why she never told me." I turned to look at her. I think I finally understand it. She didn't want to make me choose. To look at one daughter and wonder, so she handled it the quiet way. Locked the hen house and never made me watch the fox. "She made me the trustee," Grace said softly. "Before she passed, before any of this, and she never told me either." Of course she did. I said it like the most obvious thing in the world, because it was, and because it had been for 6 years, and I had somehow managed not to see it. Who else would she trust with my life, Grace? Not Vanessa. Vanessa was the loud one. You were the one who showed up. Every single day. My voice caught on that. Your mother knew exactly which of you was which. She always did. I'm just sorry it took me 80 years and an empty bank account to say it out loud. Grace didn't say anything. She just leaned her head on my shoulder the way she used to, when she was small enough to fall asleep there. And we sat like that a long time, the two of us, while the light went out of the sky. All those years this family called her the failure, and the only two people whose opinion ever mattered, her mother and me, had never been fooled for a second. I just wish I'd told her sooner. That's all. That's the whole regret. It sounds like such a small thing to carry, and it isn't. The trust did one thing I hadn't expected. Arthur insisted on it. A small, fair allowance for Grace. Payment for the work of caring for me. "Caregivers get paid, Walter," he said when I balked at it. "There's no shame in it. Eleanor wanted it that way." She wrote it right into the language. For the first time in 6 years, my daughter had a little breathing room. And she did something with it that she hadn't let herself so much as dream out loud about in a very long time. There's an empty storefront on Main Street, 2 doors down from the diner. Used to be a bakery, decades back, when I was a young man with a full head of hair. Grace had walked past that window her entire life. She leased it that summer. Nothing fancy. A few tables, a glass case. The cinnamon rolls that folks in this town already drove out of their way for. But it's hers. The first thing in her whole life that was just hers. I go every morning. She sets me up at the corner table by the window with my coffee, black, the way Eleanor never could talk me out of. And I watch Main Street wake itself up while my daughter pulls trays out of an oven. The hardware store rolls up its shutter at 8. Nathan comes in Saturdays for 2 glazed and no conversation until the second one. Some mornings my chest aches and I take my pills with the coffee, and I think about how close I came to a shared room 90 minutes from this window, in a town I only ever drove through. And then I look up at my daughter, flower on her apron, humming her mother's old songs without knowing she's doing it. And I let it go. Even Bradley comes in sometimes on his way to his new job a town over. Even Marlene, who always leaves too big a tip, like she's still apologizing and hasn't found the words yet. Sometimes I wonder whether Vanessa will ever walk through that door. I haven't decided what I'll do if she does. For now the door is ours, to open or not. She moved away that fall, took a job 2 states over, somewhere nobody knew the story of the Maplewood. She keeps up the repayment, mostly. Arthur chases her when she doesn't, and that's enough. The money comes in slow and steady into the trust. She sends a card now and then. My birthday, Christmas, short notes in that shaky hand, I read them. I keep them in Eleanor's drawer with everything else. We don't talk much. The wound is still there. Just quieter now, the way old wounds get when you're my age, and you've collected enough of them to know which ones are going to kill you and which ones are just going to ache. There was a young woman too, Brianna, Marlene's granddaughter, who texted Grace in the worst of it, when Grace felt this entire family had turned on her. Said she didn't believe a word of Vanessa's story, and never had. She turned out to be the real thing. She works weekends at the bakery now when she's home from school, and she's become like family to both of us. The kind you'd choose if a person got to choose. The relatives who came back mostly came back for good. The ones who couldn't handle the new version of us, an old man and his daughter who had stopped needing their approval, kept their distance. I stopped losing sleep over that a while ago. It's a smaller circle now, but it's a true one. Every soul left in it is somebody who would have believed my Grace in the dark, without a stack of papers to prove it. That, I've learned, is worth more than a room full of people raising their glasses. People ask me sometimes, the ones who know the story, if I ever wanted revenge. If watching my daughter come apart in that room felt good, the honest answer is no, not the way they mean it. I could have ruined her. Arthur said the criminal case was solid. I could have sent her to prison, taken every last thing she had, made sure the whole world knew exactly what she'd done to a man who taught her to ride a bicycle. There were nights, early on, when an angry old man wanted precisely that. But I figured something out somewhere along the way. And I'd like to give it to you, because it's the only thing I came out of this with that's worth passing along. If I had done it for spite, if I had lied or schemed, or torn her down just for the satisfaction of watching her fall, then I'd have become a little bit like her. And I'd have lost the one thing this whole mess never managed to take from me, the man Eleanor married. I didn't win because I was louder, or crueler, or more clever. An old man is none of those things anymore, and the ones who pretend otherwise are just tired. I won because the truth was on my side, because my wife was smarter than all of us, and thought 45 days ahead of a woman who thought she was the smartest person in every room she entered. And because I had a daughter who never once stopped showing up. Here's what I'd tell another father, if he were sitting across from me at that corner table. Don't wait. Don't wait to tell your good child that you see them. I spent years letting this family call my Grace the failure, and I let it stand, every single time, because speaking up felt like stirring the pot. Because it was Christmas. Because it was Thanksgiving. Because there's always a reason not to. That silence cost her more than the money ever did. Money you can get back, I know that now better than most men do. A daughter who spent 20 years believing her own father agreed with them? You don't get those 20 years back on a repayment schedule. And there's another thing, and I want to be plain about it, because I think it's where people my age go wrong. Love, real love, is not letting your family walk over you and calling it loyalty. Those are two different animals wearing the same coat. I confused them for the better part of my life. A great many decent people do. We're taught that a good parent gives and never counts, and that counting is a kind of betrayal. It isn't. It's a fence. And a fence is not a wall. A fence is what tells you where the yard ends, so everybody knows where they stand and nobody has to guess. You can love your child and still refuse to let her rob you. You can forgive a person and still lock the door behind them. You can keep the letter in the drawer and not answer it yet, and none of that makes you cold. It makes you a man who finally learned where the yard ends. It took me 80 years and $12 in a checking account to learn that. I hope it doesn't take you as long. This morning the light came through the bakery window, the same way it came through my kitchen that Tuesday in March. gold and slow and ordinary. The kind of light a man doesn't notice until everything's changed, and he goes looking for what was there before. Grace pulled the first tray of cinnamon rolls out of the oven, and the whole shop filled with the smell, the same smell that used to come out of Eleanor's kitchen on Sunday mornings, that used to reach up the stairs and get two little girls out of bed when nothing else on earth could. I was in my corner by the window, quilt over my knees, both hands wrapped around my coffee. Grace set a warm roll on a plate and carried it over. "Here you go, Dad." I looked up at my daughter, 52 years old, flower on her apron, her mother's smile, the one that starts at one corner and takes its time. "Thank you, Grace." And I made sure to say her name. I say it a lot now. I spent too many years letting other people say it like an apology. She sat down across from me. Outside, Main Street was waking up. Nathan would be in around 9 for his 2 glazed. "You did good, you know," I told her. "All of it. Your mother would be proud." I had to stop a second. "I'm proud." She had to look out the window for a moment. Then she reached over and squeezed my hand. A long time ago, a bank teller looked up at me and told me I should sit down, like the floor was about to go out from under my life. And it was. Everything I thought I knew about my own family came apart in that little room with the warm pages and the young mother rocking her stroller. I'm glad I sat down, I truly am, because when I finally stood back up, past the lies, past the whispers, past my own foolish pride, which was the heaviest of the 3 by a considerable margin, I knew for the first time in 80 years exactly which of my children had been my home all along. And I'll never let her forget that I know it. If you made it this far, thank you for sitting a while with an old man's story. Here's what I'll leave you with. The child who does the quiet work is almost never the one who gets the applause. But she is always, always the one who matters most. If there's a son or a daughter like that in your life, don't wait the way I did. Tell them today, and then tell me about them in the comments. I read everyone. If this story reached something in you, give it a like and subscribe to my channel. There are more stories like this one waiting for you down in the description, and I'd be glad of the company. I'll see you in the next one. Everything you've just heard was written, shaped, and told by a human being, sat with, argued over, and rewritten more times than I'd care to admit. The names have been changed, and some details along with them, because real people deserve their privacy even when they've behaved badly. But the heart of it is true in the way stories are true. Somewhere out there tonight, there's a father at a kitchen table doing arithmetic he never expected to do, and a daughter nobody has thanked yet. This story is for the both of them. I wrote it by hand, the slow way, because some things ought to be made the slow way. Thank you for listening.